Welcome to the Call to Meat Scotland podcast, where we bring you the latest insights from across the Scottish red meat sector, from the public body that works on its behalf. I'm Claire Taylor, your host for today's episode. Join us as we dive into market trends, brand communications and industry development projects in relation to Scotland's red meat sector, featuring experts, guests, farmers and stakeholders. Together, we'll explore the key facts and perspectives shaping our sector, keeping you informed and engaged with the ever-evolving landscape of the red meat industry. In this month's episode, we hear from Jenny McKerr about her role in improving private slaughter facilities across the country and the work she's doing to support farmers and processors, particularly in remote and island communities. She explains the benefits this presents to Scotland's red meat industry and how it opens up opportunities to farmers to sell their produce direct. Sarah Miller reflects on a busy summer calendar of activities for the QMS team, why she's still on a high from the Royal Highland Show, and what's on the cards for the coming months. And Ian MacDonald has the latest on the livestock markets, with beef prices creeping higher again, a rise in export volumes for lamb, and prices remaining firm in the pig sector. He also gives a teaser of what we can expect from the red meat industry profile results. First up, I caught up with Sarah Miller. Sarah, it's great to have you back on the podcast. Lots has happened since we last caught up. There's been a packed summer calendar of events. Livestock prices have remained high. We've had the weather gods in our favour, and some might even say the policy gods if the recent Highland Show in June is anything to go by. What's been keeping you busy, Sarah, over the last couple of months?
Yeah, well, over the last couple of weeks, it has been a bit more readdressing the balance between work and life. So we've actually managed to have a holiday in the sun, which was very much needed, although it did coincide with what I'm told was the best harvest week of the year, or the last few years as well. So apparently our silage wasn't as good as it could have been. But anyway, that's just sometimes you've got to readdress that kind of work-life balance. So but the big piece over the last few weeks, as many of our listeners may have seen, is the launch of our newest marketing campaign. This is something I'm really proud about, because something that's always been really important to me is connecting our levy payers and the stories that they have. Because, Claire, we've got so many amazing stories from across the red meat sector with our consumers, and we've got two fantastic ambassadors, Jennifer and John Struthers from Carluke and their young kids, who they are what the Scottish Family Farm is all about. So great, and the advert is so fantastic. So that launched, I think, on the 14th of July, and it's been done in the style of a kind of STV brand partnership. So it's been really great to make sure that the brands have prominence over the summer period, particularly when people are looking towards barbecues and summer parties and things.
And of course, Sarah, you've also had the release of the red meat industry profile. Can you share a little bit about how vital that piece of work is to the red meat sector? It's something I know we're going to have a separate episode on in a few weeks' time, but how important is that piece of work?
Yeah, so the red meat industry profile is one of our kind of key economic documents that really gives that evidence base, and we use this for everything from briefing ministers and cabinet secretaries to talking about kind of discussions with retailers and wholesalers and processors. So it really is something that can help give that evidence on just why the red meat sector across Scotland is so important. And it's something that kind of underpins, different issues as they arise. So, for example, if there's something that comes into the pig sector and we're looking to do some modelling on what the kind of economic opportunity would be, the red meat industry profile and the data within that really helps to give that kind of foundation. So we're launching it this year at Turriff Show, which is obviously the greatest show in the Northeast. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say that, but it's always a great couple of days that we have up there. So launching it there,
we'll let you say it.
And we've got an audience of kind of key stakeholders, farmers, processors, auctioneers from across the whole supply chain. So really looking forward to that.
And before we go ahead to what's coming up, Sarah, I mentioned the Highland Show at the top. We've not spoken since. What have been some of your highlights and key messages you've been mulling over since the end of June?
Yeah, I think the Highland Show for us this year, we had a really good show, and it was really good for a few different reasons. I think the Thursday and Friday have turned into such significant points in the business calendar, particularly for retailers. We had really positive discussions with, I think, all of the key retailers about where they see Scotch and how they want to invest in Scotch. And that's something that's really important just now, because just before the Highland Show, we'd obviously had a period of sustained price rises, both at Farmgate, but also then feeding through the consumer level. And there were some challenges that we were starting to see on shelf. If you remember, there had been a couple of imported lines, and it was only ever, I think, 2 lines in Asda, 1 line in Sainsbury's, 1 line in Morrison. So it wasn't a wholesale change, to beef from other parts of the world, but there was just a couple of retailers we felt were testing the water. So getting those commitments and hearing about their kind of longer term sourcing commitments was really important to hear at the Highland Show, and also to hear what they need from us to make sure that happens, because I think we often forget that sourcing and supply is a partnership. And that's the beauty of the red meat supply chain. It's got to work in partnership, from farmers all the way through to auctioneers, processors and retailers, and butchers, of course, in there as well. We also had Cabinet Secretary Mary Goujon spoke on the Thursday morning, and what was, she's indicated she's going to be stepping down in the next election. And I think I have never ever, I don't think it's ever happened before, there was a kind of round of applause in the middle of a Cabinet Secretary's speech, and it was great to hear her come out so strongly, backing the sector against the Climate Change Committee's recommendation. So that was really special, and is proper, we would kind of call, legacy stuff. Because that is a type of commitments that the government have made that do leave a legacy in terms of policy making. So that for me was a personal highlight. And I think I was at the Scottish Government's reception on the Friday night, where Jim Fairley said a few words for the Cabinet Secretary Mary Goujon, and that was really special to be part of as well, because I often think that there's lots of people in our sector that do so much work behind closed doors, and they don't often get the recognition they deserve. So it was really nice just to kind of celebrate that on the Friday night. So it has been, it was just such a special show, and seems so long ago now. We also went straight from there to the British Butchery Awards, which was the kind of big night on the calendar for the Scottish butchery sector. So I went down there a couple of weeks after that, and it was great that Puddledub Butchers won the Small Producer of the Year, and Marshall's Farm Shop won the Large Butcher Shop of the Year for Scotland. So 2 absolutely fantastic businesses, really committed to both kind of farming and producing and that retail butchery. So it was great to be down there to celebrate with them as well.
Oh, it's just great hearing so many of these success stories. And it was great to have the Cabinet Secretary on the podcast, on QMS podcast, just a few months ago. And I think it was great to really see the human side of what goes on behind the scenes, this huge dedication, and for her to get that sign at the show, and likewise to show the respect to the red meat sector here and all the work that's going on was really a highlight. I know Kate Rowell talked about it in the last podcast too, Sarah. But before you go, I will ask you to look ahead. I know you've got some big things coming up, and there might be a big event in October. What's in your world coming up, Sarah?
Yeah, well, actually, first September, so we are going into the World Steak Challenge again. So heading over to Amsterdam to help judge the World Steak Challenge. And I think I joked a bit about this last year. It is one of the biggest privileges of my life that, you get to do this really, really fun stuff, but it is also really serious. And I've been through it once. I now know not to let myself out of the traps too quickly when, they are putting down some of the best steaks in the world. I only need to eat a little bit because I think there was about 25 of them last year we had to judge. So that's the kind of next big piece. And we're doing some in-market work with some of our processors and wholesalers when we're over there as well. So always using these things as a bit of an opportunity. At the same time, Scotland Food and Drink, on the same day actually, they're also hosting a celebration of Scottish food and drink down in London at Dover House. So that's a kind of busy week for the team at QMS across all that. And it's all really leading towards the first week in October. We're back over in Anuga, which is one of the big trade shows we do every year. So really looking forward to that and being out there with the team. Delighted to see the Cabinet Secretary will be joining us again. So it was a real moment in the kind of calendar for her in the processing sector, just to make sure that she's aware of the kind of challenges that are in front of them. And I know that with the kind of increased elevated pricing we've seen, you know, it has been great to get that money back in the door, back into the primary producers, but we do know that it has caused problems for the processors, and we've just completed some work as well around price elasticity with HDB, so that report's just coming out in the next few weeks, which I think kind of highlights, you know, how we need to be quite cognizant of that piece around the consumer and all this as well. So lots happening in the background in the supply chain, but yeah, it's September World State Challenge, and then Anuga in October, so nothing ever quietens down.
It doesn't, and these events, like you say, Sarah, they're so important in the calendar. They're highlights for you and the team. There's a lot of work that goes into it, but it's also so important to showcase what we're doing and to build those connections internationally and to really see Scotland in the international stage. So I look forward to hearing about it. I look forward to hearing also how you get on with your steak judging, hopefully more than 25 this year, but it sounds like you'll be quite a pro.
Something you've just said there, Claire, that made me, you know, you often think, you know, what is the benefit on spending time internationally at some of these shows? But just as a bit of an example, obviously we've been following the kind of US trade tariffs over and the impact that that's had in the global market over the last few weeks. And, you know, one of the reasons that we've got such strong connections and we're able to kind of pick up the phone, pick up a WhatsApp message to other meat trade associations is because we have that in-person dialogue, whether it's in Amsterdam or in Anuga or in Paris. And I think that's really important that, you know, in times where things are unsure, we build up really strong international alliances, and that's something that these shows allow us to do. So sorry for cutting in there.
No, you're cutting across my steak comments, but yours were a lot more meaningful than what I was saying, Sarah. But yes, these connections are so terribly important, and best of luck with all these meetings. I'm sure by the time I next speak to you, you'll have had the steak challenge down and maybe you'll be on your way to Anuga. But best of luck with everything over the coming weeks, and it's great to talk to you again, Sarah.
No problem, thank you.
Next up, Ian McDonald takes us through the markets and what we should be paying attention to around the globe. Ian, it's great to have you back on the podcast, and I know it's been a very busy few weeks for you. You've been pulling together the findings of Scotland's red meat industry profile, and we'll be sharing a separate episode on this later in the month. But for now, we're going to hear what's happening in the livestock markets, and let's start with beef. Prices have been creeping up higher again. You've noted a year-on-year increase of 33%. What's been driving that rise, and how balanced would you say the market is right now?
Yeah, it's interesting that 33%, that is a huge jump, isn't it, in a year. However, we were even higher than that. We're 10% down from the peak, so it's just been such a volatile year that it's quite this time last year there's no chance I would have said we'd be sitting 33% higher, having already been another 10% above that. What's driving it? Typical economist, I'll say supply and demand. Certainly at GB level, the slaughter stats are suggesting less cattle have gone through this year, down about 5% in the first half compared to last year. Although last year was a strong year, I think we're still down 2% on the 5-year average. So there's definitely been less numbers going through. Demand has been certainly strong in spending terms. Consumers have a bit more money, and they've been directing that towards beef, which has been good. However, we're now starting to get a bit of volume pressure on that because the retail price has jumped so far to try and catch up with what's been happening at the farm gate.
And Ian, you said slaughter numbers have been lower in recent months. Is that more of a reflection of softer demand from processors, or are we starting to see a tightening of supply? Yeah,
that's an interesting question, kind of the one that I'm sort of trying to play out in my head at the moment. There was certainly based on the deadweight price reports, the kill was quite strong through the spring, but the DEFRA slaughter stats suggest maybe it wasn't quite so strong. But we have seen a real sharp seasonal reduction recently, more than you would normally get at this time of year. I guess some of that might be because the sort of slaughter profile was a bit earlier in the spring. I guess because of the better weather, maybe the cattle were turned out a bit earlier. So we had a higher kill just after Easter than maybe 2-3 weeks earlier than we'd normally get. And then you get a fall back in response. But certainly the last month or so, numbers have been really, really low. I think last week in Scotland, the kill was down 17% year on year for prime cattle at the large abattoirs. So that was quite a large kind of decline, suggesting to me that maybe there has been a reduced demand from the processors and not competing as hard, and there's maybe a bit of a build up on farm. But
and what are those? And what is that like comparably across the rest of the UK? Has it dropped lower in Scotland?
Yeah, so based on the certainly the deadweight price reports, we've been sort of lower and for longer in Scotland, which is kind of interesting. Yeah, and it's kind of a little bit difficult to work out why that would be. However, then if I think back 2 years ago, and the sharpest decline in calf registrations was during sort of that July to September period, and with the sort of main age at slaughter just under 2 years, then that I guess that could be influencing things as well.
When I was asking you right at the start, Ian, around the driving the rise for beef, and you were talking about the fact that demand has slightly dipped over the summer. Is that seasonal, or are higher retail prices, are they starting to bite? And how does that shift link back to Farmgate pricing trends from earlier on in the year?
Yeah, so I think probably a bit of both. So there is a seasonal dip in demand, certainly the volume of demand in the summer, and the sort of composition of the cuts that get sold change a bit as well, just because of the weather. There's less people buying roasts and that kind of product in the summer than the winter, and maybe more spending goes into burgers. And then we've got holidays as well, so the tourism stats from the UK suggest more people leave the country on holiday than come in, so that's a kind of net reduction in spending power. So there's definitely a seasonal aspect to it. And then the ONS reported that the beef retail price was about 20% higher year on year in June, and that level of price inflation definitely has an impact on sales. The Numerator by World Panel, formerly Kantar, their data is definitely showing a dip in volumes, but spending's still there. People are still spending more on beef. It's just that sharp rise in retail prices has kind of choked off a bit of the demand on the volume side, but definitely not the spending side. So yeah, kind of interesting there, and that kind of retail price rises really had to follow what's happened at the Farmgate, that surge in price. I guess if the retail price hadn't gone up, there would be major losses for the processing sector and the retailers.
And if we switch over to lamb for now, prices seem to have held up longer than usual into the summer. What's helping to sustain those levels? Are we seeing stronger demand at the processor or the export level?
Yeah, so it's almost been a very interesting year in the lamb trade. Some ups and downs, maybe down in the spring, not as strong as maybe expected, and then the price has held up higher for longer, and still I think we've seen a bit of a drop off in the markets this week, but still only 20-30 pence per kilo down on the peak of the season so far, whereas normally you'd be seeing a sharp drop back from the highs of the new season. So on the supply side, through June we were still seeing increased lamb sales into the abattoirs and the auctions, and that's auction sales in Scotland in July still higher than last year, though last year was a low year, and so we're maybe down historically. So that could be supporting things. On the trade front, exports have been pretty strong through April and May. I imagine that's probably continued into June and July as well. Certainly May, the percentage of UK production exported was, I think, 32% compared to 26.5% the previous May. So that shows that export demand has been there and helping things. And I think imports, they maybe have started to tighten a bit. New Zealand and Australia, I think their production is coming under a bit of pressure.
And on the pork side, UK production has rose by 4% in the first half of the year. Prices have held fairly firm. What's supporting that stability? And are we seeing consumers switching from beef to pork at the retail level?
Yeah, so that is interesting that the level of Farmgate pricing is maybe only down 1% compared to last year on the pig side, despite further production growth this year, roughly 4%. I think imports maybe come under a little pressure. Exports seem to have gone up a bit, but still that when you sort of crunch the numbers, that overall level of supply in the market has still risen a little bit in the first 5 months. So yeah, that suggests that domestic demand has been there, and I imagine that pork will have benefited from that retail price inflation going into beef. So obviously it's a cheaper protein, and there's a wide variety of cuts of pork that you can work with.
And in terms of taking our eyes out to the international outlook right now, is there any sort of major things you're keeping an eye on that could distort things that are happening globally?
Yeah, I guess a couple of major things at the moment. One is Ireland. Actually, just the last month or so, their cattle kill has really almost fallen off a cliff. I think the latest week it was 24% lower than last year. And normally you kind of get a seasonal low in about June, and then their kill starts to pick up a little bit towards a peak in October. But it's really fallen sharply in July, and I think that's because their kill was unsustainably high through the sort of first 5-6 months of the year, and as they've kind of almost run out of cattle. I think at one point they were 8% higher than last year, when the sort of analysts were projecting them to be have a lower kill this year than last year. And they're still up 3% at this point, but yeah, the numbers have really fallen. So that's certainly going to have an impact on our market, because they're so intertwined. And the other one is America and their tariff policy, and the potential for Brazil to be hit by an extra 50% tariff on the 1st of August. So that deadline is coming up very close, and it at the moment it looks like that 50% is going to go ahead, which would push up their tariff from 26% to 76%, which could certainly have some impact.
What would the ramifications be on that for UK producers?
I guess it'd be interesting to see just what happens. The American market is very tight, and whether they would still import at that higher tariff because Brazilian beef is so competitive globally, or if they would shift their orders to other markets, and then you get knock-on effects and product gets displaced, and you might end up with some potential for export growth from here into a market that all of a sudden gets short.
And Ian, just to finish on, I'm aware we're going to have a full podcast on the red meat industry profile, but can you share with listeners a bit of a teaser of what's really the reason behind it, and what are some of the key messaging that you're taking out of it?
Yeah, so it's just an annual statistics publication covering the red meat sector, a wide range of figures in it, from prices and slaughter numbers to international trade, and I guess the economic impact of the sector as well. And that's probably a good summary. There's a number of key points which we're going to talk about we're having a launch event at the Tariff Show. Economic contribution just shows how important the sector is to Scotland's rural economy. Livestock numbers on the downside, which is obviously not good for the long term, and why we've got our meeting our potential campaign. We know costs are still high, even though they're maybe down a little bit from the peak, still 30% higher than pre-COVID. So yeah, there's lots of stuff in there for people to keep an eye out for, and to be interested in, I guess.
Amazing. Well, Ian, thanks so much for joining us on the episode, and we look forward to hearing more about the findings from the profile. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our final guest today is Jenny McKerr, who has a fascinating background working in the red meat processing sector in Scotland. Before she went on to become a first-generation farmer, run a successful agritourism business, and for the past 7 months has been working as a private slaughter coordinator, tasked with enhancing private slaughter facilities in Scotland. Jenny, it's great to have you on the QMS podcast, and we're going to be discussing a role that you took on at the start of the year to enhance slaughter facilities here in Scotland. But before we get into the role, can we hear a little bit about you and your background and what you've been doing on the farm? What's been keeping you busy over the last few years?
Aye, so we've got a small farm at Forth in South Lanarkshire, so we've got 45 acres there. We've got a handful of cattle that we fatten for our farm shop. We've got a small distillery as well. We produce gin, and we've got 130 sheep at the minute. So beef and sheep farm with some diversified activities as well. So we're first generation. So we like to try and do a wee bit of everything and do it well. So that's the job at home. And the day job now is with Quality Meat Scotland. I've started a role there in January as private kill coordinator. So that's keeping me fairly busy as well this year.
And that role, Jenny, that's obviously what we're talking about today. What's involved? What's been the sort of key driver behind the role?
So the Scottish Government have identified the small producers. They've done a report looking at what the needs were, and identified there's a need for collaboration between farmers and processors. So I suppose my job is working with both sides to try and streamline processes, be clear on communication, and join up the dots if farmers want to add value to their livestock. Making that link with the processor as well. So that's where we're focusing just now.
And coming into that role, what was the current outlook? What was happening here in Scotland that this was needed, Jenny?
So I think it's well known that, across the UK we're losing abattoirs. It's a difficult process to run. Livestock numbers are decreasing as well. So, these abattoirs that are existing need throughput to be sustainable and to carry the overheads of running such an operation. So Scottish Government are really keen to support existing abattoirs and make sure that they're getting the throughput that they need to be sustainable as well.
And what's been the process for you since January? So have you been approaching different processors across Scotland? What's the reaction been like?
It's been really interesting, and there's not a blueprint that fits every abattoir. So we're working with abattoirs in the Highlands and Islands to the Central Belt, and everyone's got different needs. So I suppose it's understanding what their challenges are. And who their customer base is as well. And the process we're going through with abattoirs is looking at what they do on site and streamlining the private kill needs as well. So taking the stress out of private kill and being very clear about this is when it happens, and communicating that back to farmers as well, what they can offer in terms of processing, butchery, the type of cuts back to the farmers as well. And not all the processing happens at the abattoir, so sometimes it's making links with local butchers so that they can add value in other ways as well. So there's different kind of supply chains, I suppose, for different regions and different farmer groups, but it's communicating them clearly and trying to just get the job working a bit more efficiently.
And private kill in Scotland, I mean, is there a lot of private kill happening? And what's the picture like for that?
I think in Scotland, we're leading the way in terms of agritourism in Scotland, and there's more farmers that are interested in processing their own meat to sell direct to the consumer. And I think particularly since lockdown we've seen that as well. Farmers have done very well to develop a local market and demand for their meat as well. So yeah, there's definitely a growth in that area, and the abattoirs are fit for it as well. So it's just making the connections.
And so talk us through a little bit about the job itself. So I'm guessing no 2 days are the same. What happens? Are you getting out and about around the country?
Yeah, visiting. Most of the work just now has been with the abattoirs, so understanding their processes and what the challenges are for them. So, and just trying to work on the internal processes so that if we look at getting a farmer group together that wants to put more throughput through the abattoir, that they're ready to accept that as well. So it's mostly with the abattoirs at the minute, but we're really keen to work with farmer producer groups to try and get more cooperation on the farm side. There's some good projects going on looking at some of the island abattoirs and using markets as lairaging facilities so that it takes out the issue of the boats getting over to abattoirs as well. So there's lots of different things going on regionally, but we're really keen to get more farmer groups cooperating as well. So I suppose that's going to be the next focus, is how we get the producer groups set up as well.
So at the moment, how are you communicating and engaging with farmers? How can they be part of this process, Jenny?
Yeah, so we're developing the QMS website. So there's going to be a kind of one-stop shop on the website where you can look at, if you're a farmer, what do you need to do to start selling your own products as well, and a kind of walk-through guide on how to do that. But everything's going to be on the website shortly, so hopefully I'm looking forward to seeing that going live.
And just the picture of abattoirs across the country, in general, has it been a case that the smaller abattoirs have been shutting down because, like you've pointed out, throughput has been a problem? Even just, I guess you've been in this role now about 7 months. are you already seeing that this is going to make a bit of an impact and giving abattoirs the confidence and connecting those dots a lot more, so we can see that these abattoirs aren't going to be nearing extinction as much? Have you seen a difference there?
Yeah, I think it's a challenging landscape, and it's going to need a bit of capital investment, I think, next. It's good we're investing in the processes and streamlining and making it more efficient, but a lot of these abattoirs are going to need some capital investment to be sustainable as well. So it's we'll start with the basics, get that right, see where we're going with throughputs, and hopefully give farmers some confidence to process their own, that they have a supply chain that's ready to handle their animals as well. So I suppose this role should be creating a bit of confidence for farmers that there's a way to market, if you like, for local food.
And of course, Jenny, you've got your own brand. You're an agritourism, and you're actually selling your own meat, of course, as well. I mean, what's been your experience of this from that perspective, and the demand it's there, isn't it, for sort of selling direct?
Yeah, I mean, we only process maybe 6 or 8 cattle a year, so it's very small scale what we do. But we started off with Shorthorn Cross Wagyu, and now we're on to Belted Galloways. So we love our native breeds. We love our
excellent breed, Belted Galloways, Jenny. Excellent breed.
Love a Galloway. We've even got some Rigget Galloways recently as well. So
amazing.
Really passionate about the rare breeds, particularly kind of Shorthorns and Galloways. These wee native type animals that are perfectly marbled, and they taste great. I mean, you can't compete against it. So we've had the farm shop running now for 4 years, and we've created this great customer base that are looking for. They know the quality, they see the difference, they taste the difference. So we keep supplying that now. So it's really good that we've got that established. People come back again.
It's great to hear you've had great experience, and you've obviously been trying different breeds, Jenny. But are you finding, just in terms of customers, is there a real demand out there for whether it is actual specific natives or brands or breeds, or are people asking more questions about that links back to that farm story?
People are more interested in the local supply chain. They want to buy something that's not been transported around the world. They're keen that they're supporting the local farmer, and there's definitely more interest in that. I mean, I keep going back to lockdown, but I think there was a real shift since lockdown. People were aware of what was on their doorstep, and it's certainly, it's benefited us with the farm shop side of it, because we've got a great customer base, and they're more interested about the type of marble and the type of cuts. Like, we'll add a lot of value to the 4/4 cuts as well, trying out different types of steaks, and folk are so enthusiastic about cooking, which is great. It's really good when you've got your own animal and it's processed, and you get really enthusiastic about it. So there's definitely a big interest there now.
And Jenny, you've obviously got so much going on in the farm that you've shared a little bit about now, although I think you're incredibly humble. You gave a very brief introduction to what you're actually doing on the farm. I remember when we first met, or I first heard you speak, was at the Agritourism Summit, and you talked about the wee farm distillery and all the different ventures that you were looking at, and then you were adding on the cottages as well, and there's so much that you've got going on. Agritourism, I think that, and seeing this is obviously being supported by the Scottish Government, I know there was a big drive back at the conference around joining those dots and selling direct. So it's great that this has really sprung into action, and that we're seeing those opportunities opening up to smaller producers and those looking in that area. But another side to you, Jenny, that you do, you've obviously worked in processing yourself for many years. So can you talk us a little bit? Sorry, Jenny, I'm having problems with my microphone. I think it's breaking. So let me just start that bit again. And what time are we on? Okay. But Jenny, you've got experience, of course, in processing yourself. That's another hat that you wear, and obviously giving you a great background and understanding and real passion for the industry. Can you share a little bit about your journey moving up to this, and obviously then coming back into the role with QMS?
I worked for 13 years with a family-owned Scottish processor, looking after the abattoir and cutting plant and a further processing unit as well. And I suppose it was that was your roots, where you learn everything about processing. It was beef processing I was involved in. But there's a lot of pride in that job, that you handle this with a lot of respect. You know, farmers have done their bit, 2-3 years or the umpteen years of generations for breeding, and they've done their bit. I mean, it gets to an abattoir, there's a lot of respect involved in handling that animal. I suppose that's where the passion comes from. When that's been your grounding and your learning, you carry that with you throughout your career. So it's great to be back involved in the meat supply chain, and hopefully use some of the skill sets I picked up over the years in the processing plants.
It'd be fascinating to know what has it been like going back in terms of some of the changes, because there's now obviously new innovations that have come in, and just in terms of obviously people will have changed that are working in the industry since you've been there, but what's really, I guess, impressed you or really shocked you that's been really different coming back?
Yeah, I think some of the biggest challenges, particularly in the processing side, has always been staffing. So getting the right staff, the right skills to keep these plants running as well. Everything's more expensive, the inputs are more expensive, so it makes sense to be focusing on the basics, getting the yield right, the throughputs right, and handling these animals properly. So there's not been massive changes, there's just more pressures, I suppose, on the processing sector, and that's how it's so important just now to be looking at these things to make sure they're still there in the future.
And Jenny, I was saying earlier, you're 7 months into the role now. At the moment, it's a year long, the role. What's the sort of the big focus or sort of the target by the end of the year? And what's the main thing that you're sort of looking at over the coming months?
I suppose there's got an element of kind of transparency there, making sure that, what we establish in terms of supply chain, we can communicate back to farmers so that they can basically log onto the website, right, I'd like to process more animals, they can see who does what and make some decisions from there. So it's trying to simplify that process and make it accessible as well. And it's also trying to work with abattoirs to make sure that they have a sustainable process that's well communicated. And I suppose I'd like to finish with having the producer groups established, so there's a good communication between the producers and the abattoirs, so they can keep growing their businesses together as well.
Are there examples of producer groups already in operation that are, I guess, already adhering to this model that you're talking about?
Not so much that we've worked directly with. That's an area we need to work more on, I would say. There's been a lot of changes in terms of who's killing what, and we need to just establish some new producer groups and processes, but there's some that's work in progress at the minute.
And Jenny, we were talking before we pushed record, you were talking about Dingwall, and it was really interesting, you were saying that the highest percentage of private kill actually is happening in Dingwall. Can you talk a little bit about different parts of the country and where the focus has been, because that was, and what kind of areas that it's servicing?
Aye, Dingwall, 30% of private kill is going through Dingwall, and they've got a fantastic operation up there. And I've been really impressed with what I've seen. I mean, they deal with as far as Orkney, right the way down into kind of Fife and kind of central Scotland as well. So a really good operation there. And they also do a lot of the butchery on site, or there's options there to use local butchers as well. So these abattoirs aren't always doing the full job. Sometimes they are just killing the animal, and then you can take it back to your local butcher as well. So it's quite nice to keep that local supply chain as well. So no, Dingwall's been a fascinating project. There's a lot of progress on the islands. They're so progressive on the islands. I've been really impressed, particularly at Mull. They're doing a fantastic job at Mull, and they're looking at using Oban Market as a lairaging facility to take out the issue with the boats. So really forward thinking, getting that collaboration at the market, and then it's one lot of transport over, and there's further projects there as well, and even like up in Stornoway, what a fantastic plant they've got, again progressive, looking at different brands as well for the islands. And these abattoirs are very passionate about what they do and very passionate about their heritage. So I think that's really important to capture with each solution for each area.
And when it comes to talking about private kill, there's been a lot of discussion over the last few years, Jenny, about mobile abattoirs. You're talking about the islands there, and obviously this is not considering that as part of it. What's the sort of discussion point? Where are we at with that in Scotland just now, those conversations?
you think a mobile abattoir, well, that'd be a great solution because of how remote areas and everything else, but there's been a lot of viability studies done into the mobile abattoirs, and it's not quite as straightforward. You need lairaging facilities, you need to be able to manage the waste that comes out of it, chill facilities. So it's not quite as easy as just turning up with a trailer and cracking on. So no, it's not something that's pursued massively at the minute. I think the Scottish Government focus is definitely, support the abattoirs that exist, because they need to be there for the local supply chain to thrive.
And has there been any talk in the industry about new abattoirs being set up as you're moving around the country? Or is it really about, I guess, making sure the current ones are sustainable and they're getting the throughput for them to continue?
Yeah, there is chat about a new abattoir coming into the Borders kind of region as well, but that's more a commercially focused abattoir. So again, my area of work is working with the smaller abattoirs that are dealing with the private side of it, that aren't dealing with the big retailers, because these are the guys that have the flexibility to support the farming community.
And I was just thinking about QMS's campaign, Meeting Our Potential. That's been we've talked about it quite a lot in this podcast over the last few months. And this idea, and everybody who's a regular listener will have heard me talk about the 2 cows per herd over the next few years. Are you hearing anyone talking about that when you're heading out and about? Because for smaller producers, knowing they've got the confidence and I guess this improved access to private kill, they're possibly more likely to want to endorse that and be part of that. What are you hearing from producers on the ground?
I think this year's been a wee bit different, Claire, to be honest with you, because we had that massive price inflation at the start of the year, and the price of stock is through the roof, I suppose. So it's fine, the 2 cows a year will happen at some point, but I think the price needs to be right for farmers to do that. But I suppose if you're processing your own, if you're getting a better margin from your cattle or sheep, whatever you're doing, then you're generating that extra income to have the confidence to say, well, do you know what, I'll put an extra beast on this year, or you're generating more confidence in your own business if you can get a wee bit more margin out your animal. So I suppose that's why a lot of farmers are saying, let's diversify a bit and develop that market.
Amazing. And just lastly, if anybody wants to find out more about what you're doing, you've said that you're looking at creating a handbook for private kills. So that's going to be something you're going to make available for anyone that wants to get in touch. You've talked about these producer groups, and so that's being a real focus of your next step. So where can you advise listeners to find out more and to get in touch, Jenny?
Yeah, just through QMS. So if you go on the website, you can contact myself through QMS for any more information or potential projects to work on with private kill as well. I'm always happy to talk about animals and processing and agritourism and everything like that. So no, if you can contact me through QMS, we can look at potential projects.
Oh, Jenny, it's so fascinating hearing about the work that you're doing, and also a great insight for lots of listeners as well. You've taken us on a bit of a trip around the country onto the islands and just hearing what's happening and hearing a bit about the confidence out there too. Thanks so much for sharing about the role, and hopefully we'll get you on in a few months and can hear how you've got lots of producer groups set up and that everything's being coordinated very efficiently.
I hope so.
Thanks, Jenny.
Thanks, Claire. Cheers.
Thank you for tuning in to the Quality Meat Scotland podcast. Don't forget to subscribe wherever you listen for more monthly episodes as we continue to explore the vital topics affecting the red meat industry. If you want to stay updated with the latest news in our sector, be sure to sign up for the weekly QMS newsletter by emailing info@qmsscotland.co.uk. Join us next time for more insights from experts, farmers and industry leaders. But until then, stay connected with us on our social channels and keep up with the latest news from Quality Meat Scotland.